Have you ever noticed, the harder you chase something, the more it seems to run away from you? The promotion, the relationship, the respect, the success, the perfect life you imagined in your head. You tell yourself, once I get this, then I'll finally feel peace. But peace never comes, because the human mind has been trapped in a dangerous illusion for thousands of years. The illusion that happiness lives in the future. And today, you're about to discover why this belief silently destroys your inner freedom. There's an ancient Buddhist teaching that most people completely misunderstand. A teaching so powerful that if you truly absorb it, your anxiety begins to lose control over you. Your fear weakens. Your overthinking slows down. And for the first time in years, you start breathing like a free human being again. This teaching is simple. Detach from outcomes. Not from life. Not from goals. Not from dreams. From outcomes. Because the moment your happiness becomes dependent on a result, you become a prisoner. And most people never realize they're living in emotional chains. They wake up stressed, sleep worried, constantly refreshing their lives looking for validation. Did they text back? Did I get enough likes? Will I fail? What if people judge me? What if I lose everything? The mind becomes addicted to controlling what it was never designed to control. And that addiction creates suffering. The Buddha understood this deeply. Over 2,500 years ago, he observed something shocking about human nature. People don't suffer because life is hard. They suffer because they resist reality. They cling, they expect, they demand certainty from an uncertain world. And when reality refuses to obey them, they break. Think about that carefully. Most people are not exhausted from working hard. They are exhausted from mentally fighting life every single day, fighting uncertainty, fighting rejection, fighting change, fighting outcomes they cannot fully control. And this silent battle drains the soul. But here's the truth nobody teaches you. You were never meant to control the entire universe. You were only meant to control your effort, your mindset, and your actions. Everything else is temporary. And the moment you understand this, life changes. Imagine planting a seed. You water it, protect it, give it sunlight. But after that, you cannot scream at the seed to grow faster. You cannot force nature to obey your timeline. Yet this is exactly what humans do with life. We work hard, then panic. We love someone, then obsess. We chase success, then fear failure. We become emotionally attached to specific outcomes. And attachment creates fear, because the mind says, if this doesn't happen, I cannot be okay. That sentence alone is the source of massive suffering. Modern society trains people to live this way. From childhood, people are taught, your value depends on achievement. Your worth depends on results. Your identity depends on winning. So people become terrified of failure, not because failure is deadly, but because they believe failure destroys who they are. This is why so many people secretly feel anxious, even when life looks successful on the outside. They are emotionally dependent on outcomes, dependent on approval, dependent on recognition, dependent on control. But Buddhism teaches something radically different. It teaches that true freedom begins the moment you stop attaching your inner peace to external conditions. Read that again in your mind. True freedom begins the moment you stop attaching your inner peace to external conditions. Because external conditions are unstable by nature. Money changes. People change. Opportunities change. Bodies age. Circumstances shift overnight. If your peace depends on unstable things, your peace will always be unstable too. That's why detachment is not weakness. It's emotional mastery. And no, detachment does not mean becoming cold, lazy, or emotionless. This is where many people misunderstand Buddhist wisdom. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop destroying yourself over things you cannot control. There's a massive difference. A detached person can still love deeply, work hard, build businesses, chase dreams, create powerful goals. But internally, they remain grounded. They don't collapse emotionally every time life moves differently than expected, because they understand something most people never learn. Control is an illusion. Think about how much of your stress comes from trying to control things outside yourself. Other people's opinions, the future, timing, success, relationships, outcomes. Now imagine how much energy would return to your life if you stopped trying to mentally dominate reality. That is the beginning of inner peace. And ironically, detached people often perform better in life. Why? Because fear no longer controls them. When you're obsessed with outcomes, your mind becomes tense. You overthink, force things, panic under pressure, seek constant validation. But when you detach, you become calm, focused, present, and presence creates power. Look at elite athletes, top performers, powerful leaders. The best among them understand the secret. They focus completely on the process, not the outcome, because obsessing over results weakens performance. Fear enters the mind, but focusing on the present moment creates clarity. Buddhist monks have practiced this mental discipline for centuries, not because they rejected life, but because they understood the psychology of suffering. The human mind creates pain by resisting uncertainty, and modern life has made this even worse. Today, people are constantly comparing themselves. Social media has trained millions to measure their value through external results. Who's richer? Who's happier? Who's more attractive? Who's more successful? And slowly, people lose connection with their inner selves. They become performers instead of human beings, always chasing, never arriving. But the Buddha taught something powerful. Desire itself is not the enemy. Attachment is. There is nothing wrong with wanting success. The suffering begins when success becomes your emotional survival system, because then fear enters everything. You fear rejection, fear loss, fear embarrassment, fear uncertainty, and fear steals your life before failure ever does. Let this sink in. Many people never truly live because they are too busy trying to avoid pain. But pain is part of life. Rejection is part of life. Failure is part of life. Loss is part of life. Uncertainty is part of life. Detachment teaches you to stop fighting these realities. And when you stop fighting reality, suffering begins to dissolve. This doesn't happen overnight. The ego hates detachment because the ego wants guarantees. It wants certainty, control, recognition, validation. But life guarantees none of these permanently, which means the ego will always feel threatened. That's why people cling so hard to outcomes. Deep down, they believe outcomes define identity. But Buddhism says your identity itself is constantly changing. Your thoughts change. Your emotions change. Your body changes. Your circumstances change. So why attach your entire peace to temporary conditions? The moment you understand impermanence, attachment weakens. And when attachment weakens, fear weakens too. This is why some of the calmest people are not those who control life the most, but those who accept life the most. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is wisdom. It means understanding reality clearly instead of emotionally fighting it. Imagine standing in the ocean trying to stop the waves with your hands. Impossible. Yet mentally, this is what most humans do every day. They try to stop change, stop uncertainty, stop discomfort. And the more they resist, the more exhausted they become. But the wise person learns to move with life instead of against it. This is the hidden power of detachment. You stop demanding that life obey your expectations. And because of that, life loses the power to emotionally destroy you. A rejection no longer defines you. A setback no longer breaks you. A delay no longer steals your peace. You become mentally stronger, not because life became easier, but because your attachment became weaker. And this changes everything. Because once you stop clinging desperately to outcomes, you finally become free enough to fully live, to fully love, fully create, fully grow, fully experience the present moment, without constant fear poisoning your mind. But there's another layer to this wisdom that most people never hear, and it may completely change the way you look at your life forever. Because sometimes the very thing you desperately wanted was never meant to save you in the first place. I'll be happy when I make more money. I'll be happy when I find the right relationship. I'll be happy when people finally respect me. I'll be happy when my life looks perfect. Human beings spend years repeating these silent sentences inside their minds. And without realizing it, they turn happiness into a destination instead of a state of being. This is one of the greatest psychological traps ever created, because the mind keeps moving the finish line. You achieve one goal, then immediately create another. You buy something new, then suddenly it no longer feels enough. You reach success, yet anxiety still follows you home at night. Why? Because attachment can never be satisfied permanently. The Buddha understood this with terrifying clarity. He saw that the human mind constantly says, something is missing. And because of that feeling, people spend their entire lives chasing external things, hoping to finally feel complete. But external things were never designed to permanently complete an internal emptiness. That's why even wealthy people suffer. Famous people suffer. Powerful people suffer. Some of the most successful individuals in the world are secretly exhausted inside, because success without inner peace is just a prettier form of suffering. Modern culture rarely talks about this. Instead, society constantly tells people, more achievement equals more happiness. More attention equals more value. More possessions equals more fulfillment. So people become addicted to chasing, but the chase never ends. And eventually, the mind burns out. This is why so many people today feel emotionally numb. They are overstimulated, but spiritually empty, always consuming, always comparing, always striving, yet never feeling truly at peace. Buddhist wisdom offers a completely different path. Instead of asking, how do I control life enough to feel okay? It asks, how do I become okay even when life is uncertain? That question changes everything. Because now your peace is no longer dependent on conditions constantly changing around you. Most people believe freedom means getting everything they want, but real freedom is different. Real freedom is when your emotional state is no longer controlled by whether you get what you want. That is power. Think about how much control other people have over your emotions when you're attached. One rejection ruins your confidence. One criticism destroys your mood. One setback makes you question your worth. Why? Because attachment makes external events feel personal. But detached awareness creates emotional stability. This doesn't mean you stop feeling emotions. Buddhism never teaches emotional suppression. In fact, suppressing emotions creates more suffering. True detachment means you observe emotions without becoming enslaved by them. You feel disappointment without collapsing. You feel sadness without losing yourself. You feel fear without obeying it. This is mental strength at the highest level. And honestly, most people never develop it because modern life encourages emotional dependence. People are taught to seek constant stimulation, notifications, validation, attention, approval. The mind becomes addicted to emotional highs. And addiction always creates weakness. Why? Because anything you emotionally need can control you. Read that carefully. Anything you emotionally need can control you. If you desperately need approval, people control you. If you desperately need success, outcomes control you. If you desperately need certainty, fear controls you. This is why detachment is not about losing life. It's about reclaiming your inner power. A detached person becomes difficult to manipulate because they are no longer emotionally starving. They stop begging life to constantly confirm their worth. And this creates a powerful calmness. You can feel this energy when you meet someone truly grounded. They don't chase attention desperately. They don't panic under pressure. They don't need to prove themselves every second. There's a quiet strength inside them. That strength comes from inner stability. And inner stability comes from non-attachment. The Buddha compared attachment to holding a burning coal. The tighter you grip it, the more you suffer. Yet most humans grip tightly to everything. Relationships, identity, expectations, past pain, future fantasies, and then they wonder why anxiety consumes them. But here's something important. Detachment does not mean you stop dreaming. It means your dreams stop controlling your identity. You can still pursue greatness. In fact, Buddhism encourages growth, discipline, and self-awareness. But it teaches you to move from clarity instead of desperation. There's a huge difference between inspired action and fearful chasing. Fearful chasing says, if I fail, I'm worthless. Inspired action says, I will give my best and remain at peace regardless of the outcome. That mindset changes performance completely because fear clouds intelligence. When people become obsessed with outcomes, their nervous system stays in survival mode. They overthink constantly, second-guess themselves, seek reassurance, avoid risks, fear embarrassment. Their energy becomes scattered, but detached focus creates sharpness because the mind is no longer wasting energy trying to emotionally control the future. This is why mindfulness is such a core part of Buddhist practice. Mindfulness pulls you back into the present moment, and the present moment is the only place life actually exists. Think about it. Most anxiety lives in the future. Most regret lives in the past. But peace exists here. Now, that's why the detached mind becomes powerful. It stops mentally time traveling into imaginary disasters all day long. Instead, it fully engages with reality as it is. And reality becomes lighter when resistance disappears. One of the biggest causes of suffering is the belief that life should always go according to plan. But life never promised that. Sometimes relationships end unexpectedly. Sometimes opportunities disappear. Sometimes failure arrives without warning. And none of these things mean your life is over. But attachment makes temporary pain feel permanent. This is why people sometimes break emotionally after losing things they thought defined them. A career, a relationship, a dream. Without attachment, pain still exists. But identity survives. Because your entire sense of self was never chained to one outcome. This is what Buddhism teaches so beautifully. Everything changes. Everything. And once you deeply understand impermanence, you stop trying to build eternal emotional security from temporary things. That realization can feel uncomfortable at first, but eventually it becomes liberating. Because now you stop expecting life to remain frozen. You stop demanding permanent certainty from an impermanent world. And strangely enough, that's when peace begins. There's an ancient Zen story about a farmer whose horse ran away. The neighbor said, "What terrible luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned with several wild horses. The neighbor said, "What amazing luck." The farmer replied again, "Maybe." Later, the farmer's son broke his leg while training one of the horses. "Terrible luck," the neighbor said. "Maybe," the farmer answered. Soon after, soldiers arrived to force young men into war. But the injured son was spared. The neighbors called it incredible luck. Again, the farmer simply said, "Maybe." The wisdom of this story is profound. Humans constantly label events too quickly. Good, bad, success, failure. But life unfolds in ways the ego cannot fully understand. Sometimes rejection protects you. Sometimes failure redirects you. Sometimes loss awakens you. Detached people understand this deeply. That's why they trust life more. Not blindly, but wisely. They understand that obsessing over outcomes creates unnecessary suffering. So instead, they focus on what they can control. Their effort, their mindset, their discipline, their character. And then they let go. This is not weakness. This is emotional evolution. And the truth is, most people never experience real peace because they are psychologically addicted to control. They want guarantees before action, certainty before courage, validation before confidence. But life doesn't work that way. Growth requires uncertainty. Transformation requires discomfort. And freedom requires letting go. That's why detachment feels scary at first. Because the ego believes attachment equals safety. But attachment often creates the very suffering people are trying to avoid. The more desperately you cling, the more fear enters your life. Fear of losing, fear of failure, fear of change, and fear slowly shrinks your world. But when you release attachment, you become lighter, braver, more present, more alive. You stop treating life like a constant emergency. And maybe for the first time in years, your nervous system finally relaxes. But there's still one final truth most people resist hearing. A truth about identity itself. Because the deepest attachment humans carry is not to money, relationships, or success. It's attachment to who they think they are. And this hidden attachment silently controls almost every decision they make. Who are you really? Not your name. Not your job, not your social status, not the version of yourself you show the world. Who are you beneath all of that? Most people never seriously ask this question. And because they never ask it, they spend their entire lives protecting an identity that was never truly stable in the first place. This is the deepest attachment humans carry. Attachment to the self, the ego, the story in your mind that constantly says, "This is who I am. This is what I deserve. This is how life should treat me." And the moment reality challenges that story, suffering begins. Someone criticizes you. Your ego feels attacked. You fail at something. Your ego feels humiliated. Someone ignores you. Your ego feels rejected. But notice something carefully. The pain often comes less from the event itself, and more for what the event means to your identity. That is the hidden prison. The Buddha taught that the self most people cling to is not fixed. It is constantly changing. Your thoughts change daily. Your emotions change hourly. Your beliefs evolve. Your body ages. Your personality shifts through experience. Yet the ego desperately tries to create a permanent identity from temporary pieces, and then it spends years defending that illusion. This is why people become exhausted. They are not only managing life, they are managing an image, trying to appear successful, trying to appear strong, trying to appear important, trying to avoid judgment. And secretly, many people are terrified. Terrified that without achievements, attention, or validation, they are nothing. But Buddhist wisdom reveals something shocking. You do not need to constantly prove your worth to exist peacefully. You already exist, and existence itself is enough. Think about how much suffering comes from comparison. People compare money, looks, relationships, followers, careers. The ego constantly measures itself against others. Why? Because the ego survives through separation. It wants to feel superior, or it fears feeling inferior. But both are traps. The detached mind slowly steps outside this game. It no longer needs to win every invisible competition, and that creates incredible freedom. Imagine waking up without constantly needing to impress people, without needing every person to approve of you, without mentally collapsing every time someone misunderstands you. That is peace. The Buddha never taught people to hate themselves. He taught them to stop confusing themselves with temporary mental constructs. Because your thoughts are not always truth. Your emotions are not permanent identity. Your failures are not your essence. And your past is not your prison unless you keep carrying it. Many people live trapped inside old versions of themselves. One mistake becomes their identity. One heartbreak becomes their identity. One failure becomes their identity. And years later, they still emotionally live inside that moment. But life is movement. Nothing stays the same. And healing begins when you stop worshiping old pain. Detachment allows you to release the psychological weight you were never meant to carry forever. This is why forgiveness is powerful. Not because the past was acceptable, but because carrying hatred poisons your own mind. Some people spend decades replaying pain inside their heads. Revenge fantasies, regret, anger, resentment, and slowly, bitterness becomes identity. But the detached mind understands something deeper. Holding on to poison does not punish the other person. It punishes you. So eventually, wisdom says, let go, not because it was easy, not because it was fair, but because your peace matters more. This is one of the hardest spiritual lessons a human can learn, because the ego feeds on emotional attachment. It feeds on stories, victim stories, success stories, identity stories. But peace begins when you stop turning every experience into your entire identity. You are not just your worst moment. You are not just your greatest achievement either. You are awareness experiencing life in motion. And once you understand this, something extraordinary happens. You stop fearing change so much because you realize change has always been happening. The person you were 5 years ago already disappeared. The person you were as a child disappeared too. Life has always been transformation. Yet humans suffer because they demand permanence from a temporary world. But permanence was never the point of life. Presence was. This moment, right now, the breath entering your lungs, the sound around you, the awareness inside you reading these words. Life is happening here, not in yesterday, not in tomorrow, but attachment constantly drags a mind away from the present moment. The ego says, replay the past, fear the future, control everything, protect your image, and because of that, people miss their lives while trying to mentally control life. This is why Buddhist monks train the mind through meditation. Meditation is not escape. It is awareness training. It teaches you to observe thoughts without becoming trapped inside them, to watch emotions rise and fall like waves, to realize that inner silence still exists beneath mental chaos. And in that silence, there is freedom, not the freedom of controlling everything, but the freedom of no longer being controlled by everything. That is true power. The world may remain uncertain. People may still judge you. Plans may still fail. Pain may still arrive sometimes. But internally, you become stable, like a mountain during a storm, because your peace no longer depends on perfection. You understand now, life is temporary. Outcomes are temporary. Emotions are temporary. Even the version of yourself you cling to is temporary. So instead of desperately controlling life, you begin experiencing it fully. You love without trying to possess. Work without destroying your peace. Dream without attaching your identity to results. And for the first time, you feel free. This is the hidden meaning behind detachment. It is not giving up on life. It is finally ending the war against reality. And once that war ends, a different kind of strength appears. A calm strength, a grounded strength, the kind of strength that cannot be easily manipulated by fear, rejection, or uncertainty. Because now you understand something most people spend their entire lives missing. Peace was never hiding in the future. It was hidden beneath attachment all along. So stop chasing life so desperately. Be present. Be aware. Give your best effort. Let go of what you cannot control. And watch how your entire inner world begins to transform. Because the moment you detach from outcomes, you stop surviving life and finally start living it. Thank you for watching. If this video helped awaken a new perspective inside you, make sure to subscribe to Wisdom Hub Buddha, like this video, and share it with someone who needs inner peace, mental strength, and freedom from overthinking. And remember, the calmer your mind becomes, the more powerful your life becomes.